Mount Rushmore 2 years in a row. There they are. Yeah, land back. Hello. Welcome to the club. Because we did that. We climbed Mount Rushmore 2 years in a row, and they drug us off and land back. This is our land. We're the only ones that have title to the Black Hills, and no one's going to know about it unless we make it known,
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we did. So, yeah, of course, land back. That goes way back, even before my time.
Hamadakyapi, Tabloka Wakita Amachapi. My name is Nick Tilson. My Lakota name is Looking Buffalo Bull. I'm Lakota, Oglala Lakota from the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation, and I'm the host of the Land Back for the People podcast, hosted and produced here by awesome team here at Indian Collective. Big shout out to Willie White and Steph Vieira, who are helping put on this podcast. I come into this recognizing that there's a movement of the times of now, and that the land back movement is the red power movement of our generation, and that as being somebody who was raised up in the American Indian movement by parents who were active in the movement, and active in fighting for Mother Earth, and active for fighting for the rights of the people, I continued on those things. And I watch all throughout Indian country, all these amazing indigenous people that are rising up, fighting for Mother Earth, rising up, fighting for their lands, rising up, fighting for their rights. And they are doing so as, powerful indigenous communities. And so it's my honor to be able to host people on this podcast and to have conversation about this, this movement that is fighting for the liberation of our people and our homelands. And so excited to continue to have many guests come on to this podcast over the coming months, and with any luck, over the coming years. I'm also a father of 4 wild Oglala kids, and both live still on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation and also in the Chesapa in the Black Hills. So yes, we did it. We started a podcast. We started a land back podcast that is about the land back movement, that is about this revolutionary movement that is spreading throughout the indigenous world. And this podcast, Land Back for the People, it's about the land and about the people. And those who are leading this movement, those who are throwing down to protect Mother Earth, those who are rising up against corporations that are out here to erode our rights and to pollute the waters of our homelands. This podcast is about making sure that we continue to have the confidence, and that there is no true liberation unless we begin to dismantle many of the systems that were put in place, that were designed to oppress our people, that were designed to push our people down. And it so happens to be that land is at the cross intersections of all of these issues. It's at the cross intersection of the environmental justice movement. It is at the cross intersection of the conservation movement. It's at the cross intersection of the climate movement. It's at the cross intersection of the human rights movement. In fact, it's at the crux of even the economic conversation happening of how do we build new economies that aren't just takers, economies that continue to destroy Mother Earth and give rights to corporations over people. Well, the people are rising up. That is no doubt that is happening. And this movement is built on the shoulders of people who have sacrificed their freedoms. It is built on a foundation of people fighting for land returned for generations. It is built on the foundation and the shoulders of our ancestors who continue to fight for our language, who continue to fight for our ways of life, who continue to fight for Mother Earth. And the land back movement is on a continuum of indigenous resistance. I want to make it really clear, land back in this movement did not come from a think tank. It did not come from a marketing company. It didn't come from places far away from the issues that we're faced with. Land back came from the front line. It came from those of us who have been beaten by police, those who have been rising up against corporations, those of us who put our lives at risk for there to be a movement for this to happen today. And those north of the medicine line who've been rising up to protect their indigenous rights in so-called Canada, to our relatives in the south of Mexico. So on this podcast, we will have real talk about the state of this movement. We'll have conversations with our elders and the next generation of folks that are coming. And in this first podcast, being right here, coming from Oshetishakoi lands, coming right here from Mini-Luzaha, coming right here from the Chesapa in the Black Hills. I couldn't think of a better guest to have than Tui Madonna Thunder Hawk, who is a matriarch of our communities and our people. She jokingly says that she's like the Forrest Gump of indigenous resistance, because she's literally been at almost every focal point of indigenous resistance for the past 55 years. From the takeover of the BIA headquarters, to the Trail of Broken Treaties, to Alcatraz Island, to all of the occupations of Mount Rushmore, to the siege at Wounded Knee, and to Standing Rock, and to many of the struggles happening today. She's still there. And so I want to give it over to her to have an opportunity to introduce yourself to the listeners.
All right. Okay. Yeah. I'm really glad to be here. I mean, podcast, to me, that's just like exciting. And it's happening right here, with Indian Collective, all these young people, our own studio. I'm sitting in a studio, it's just awesome. And for someone at my age and gone, all these decades of struggle and you name it, this is a big deal for me, because we didn't have this. This is only things we thought might happen someday in the future. When I was young, we didn't. There's nothing. There was no native press. There was no. It was just struggle. And so it's all positive for me, and I'm really happy to be here, and I'm glad that I get to be a part of this, because I think what we need to, hopefully, there's people that are listening. We need to. It's important that we tell our own stories. What happened, in our days of resistance, for like what happened when I was young, and how it's carried me through my entire adult life, the resistance and it's part of who we are. That's kind of generalizing, but basically that's what it is, because our history stands for us. And there's many things that we are so unique here in the United States. There's so many things, that status that we have that nobody else in this country has. I don't care how much money they pile up. I don't care how religious some people are. They don't have what we have, because we are indigenous. We are of this land, and we're the only ones that can say that. We're the only ones in this country that can say we are never homeless. Houseless, yes, at times, but never back. That carries a lot of history and a lot of hope. So I love that saying, land back.
So yeah, let's jump into it. Let's jump into it here. Being at almost every modern indigenous land back or land struggle, I should say, over the past 50, 60 years, like, why do you think it's so important? Why do you think it's so important that we continue to fight for the return of our lands? And why is it important to you personally?
Well, for me personally, it started out for me when I was young, and resistance was brand new in the late 60s, early 70s. It was the fact that we were learning, because we weren't learning it in school or any kind of history written about our people, but we were learning from our elders who were raised by grandparents who had memory of the Battle of Little Bighorn. That's how close our history is to us. And they were the ones that brought us along, and everything was new to me, the history of our people. But one of the things that I personally saw and was aware of, where I grew up on my reservation is now underwater. And that was close to 1 million acres of the Cheyenne River Sioux Reservation when our shoreline went underwater for the Apoie Dam.
Mm-hmm.
So I saw that happen. I watched that. So I think that had a lot of effect on me, along with everything else, and the elders that brought us along and educated us and said, woke us up, and said, here's your history. Here's what's really going on, And there's all these services that are available through IHS and the Bureau of Indian Affairs, but many of those came about because of our ratified treaty rights that our ancestors made with the federal government. And the federal government, so that the treaty provisions wouldn't get the credit that they deserve, they made it countrywide for every reservation, whether they had treaties or not. Here's the services we are giving to you, and so that was awakening for me to learn this history of our own people and our ancestors. So it's an individual thing, but it's also, I believe, comes from strong families. Because there was one of my mentors at the time, her name was Yetzi Blue. She's Tulalip from the western coast, and Janet McLeod. And she told me, she said, Madonna, we are no longer strong nations of people, indigenous, but we are strong families. And these strong families are holding it down. In every Indian territory and in communities, these strong families are holding it down. So I thought, again, there you go. So stop looking at the negative and look at the positive, So you are responsible, because each generation has a responsibility. It isn't something that you decide, oh, well, I want to be a good Indian, so I'm going to, carry a sign sometimes. No, it has a lot more to do with whether you take on that responsibility, because that's what it is. It's a responsibility. And everybody takes that responsibility in different ways. Like the young people, for example, that are in this building, Native Collective building, sitting in the heart of Rapid City, South Dakota. What they do, they show up every day, and the work that they're doing, to me, that's resistance. That's just as important, as putting your body on the line on a blockade or someplace, Everything is important for us to maintain who we are.
So when you started, so here's a question. When you started hearing, you've been around for a long time, you've seen the activists come and go, slogans come and go, you've seen a lot come and go. When young people started saying, like, land back, when you started hearing, like, younger ones say land back, like, what was your reaction to that? Like, what did you think when you started hearing people like land back, all like in one word,
Yeah.
Like, what was your reaction to that?
My reaction, was my sister and I was like, there they are. Yeah, land back. Hello, welcome to the club. Because we did that. We climbed Mount Rushmore 2 years in a row. And they drug us off and land back. This is our land. We're the only ones that have title to the Black Hills. And no one's going to know about it unless we make it known.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we did. So yeah, of course, land back. That goes way back. Even before my time.
So whenever so now, like, whenever somebody walks up to you on the street or on the res or at a powwow or at a ride, wherever, and says, "What is land back to you?"
Oh, I have lots of responses, but it depends on who's asking it. If it's a non-native, I'll say, well, yeah, land back means the United States starts obeying their own laws. The fraudulent laws or policies on how to legally take our land, legal in their eyes, but illegal in ours.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's a native person, they would say, come on, that's what our ancestors did. So you and I can be walking around here, So now it's our turn. It's our time.
So you mentioned Mount Rushmore, and there's been various different protests throughout history at Mount Rushmore. You've led and participated in some. So have I. What for you? Like, why was that symbolism? Like the first time you guys ever went to Mount Rushmore and protested there, what was the symbolism? Why was it important to make a political stance there at Mount Rushmore? Of all the places to make, a political stance, why was that important there, right at Mount Rushmore, in the Black Hills?
Well, for me, it was kind of like automatic reaction, because I remember when I was 13 years old, my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, Mabel Archon, she's from the Yankton Reservation, and she was working with the 4-H organization, and they had a camp in the Black Hills, and she was there on, teaching, whatever, beadwork, something like that. Anyway, and this is back in the 50s. I'm 13 years old, So she wanted me to come and stay because one of her uncles was coming, and his name was Standing Bear, and he was from the Pine Ridge Reservation, but he was going to come and spend some time. And she was living in Custer then, so she said, so if you're here, then you can make sure, because he was elderly, and she said, he might wander off, or, the door might, make sure the doors aren't locked, and, stuff like that, kind of watch out for him. So I said, okay, fine. And I was excited, I get to go to Black Hills, hang out with my grandma. Well, he ended up talking English and Indian to me and telling me about the Black Hill, about Mount Rushmore. And, at the time, I just wanted to listen to, back in the day, radio was all we had, rock and roll, and I was thinking, doing the dishes and stuff. And then, but he was, wanting to talk. So then, of course, being respectful, because that's what you're taught. So I was listening to him, and he said, all right, he was there because he was visiting Crazy Horse Mountain. And Jokovsky, the guy that was carving it, was alive then. So he said, I go and I visit with him every now and then, because he was one of the group of men that went to Jokovsky and asked him to carve Crazy Horse in response to the Mount Rushmore, because they did not want those 4 faces of Mount Rushmore carved on them in the hills. So he said that was what they did to, because of that. So he explained all that to me. And at the time, I didn't know, I didn't care. I could care less. I wanted to listen to, rock and roll music on the radio. But he taught me, and I listened and I heard that. So when the time came, that in the early 70s, I think it was 1970, when we first went up Mount Rushmore, everything he told me came back.
Mm.
And that's why I went. And I told everybody there, that's why,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I relate to that too, because I think that like symbols matter in society. Symbols matter in society, and I think that the Black Hills being one of the longest existing legal battles for land in the United States, to have Mount Rushmore carved into this sacred place is like the biggest sort of sign of disrespect that somebody could have. And so I know that like as a young organizer, watching and looking at historical video, looking at historical pictures of the actions that happened up there, the messaging was so strong. And that's one thing I always really like appreciated about your generation and the American Indian movement, was it chose to protest at places because of the symbolism of the injustice that happened there.
Mm-hmm.
And that always like stuck true to me, because then it made it translatable to me, as a young organizer.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I can relate to that. I can relate to that as a symbol of injustice,
Mm-hmm.
and it kind of, pisses you off. And I think that like, I think that in order to organize, I think you got to get a little pissed off sometimes. And so I appreciate that. I appreciate those the teachers at certain places, particularly when it comes to land. Before we transition, you were at Alcatraz. You were at the takeover of the BIA. You were at Wounded Knee. You were at the protest at Mount Rushmore. You were at Standing Rock. What have you seen like in the evolution of the indigenous people's fight for land back? How have you seen things change over time in strategies and tactics that people are taking?
It isn't so much, I don't think that I thought of the change so much as I thought, well, it's their time. So when you say, like when we talk, about things like this, different elders that we get together, when we say things like, well, it's their time, that means a whole lot. That means everything. Times are different. The mindset of the entire country is different than it was back when we were young, so that covers all of it when you say, well, it's their time, we know what we're talking about. So, and how it's interesting to see how each group, and I think we don't look at it generations like the rest of the country does. Our people don't think of it that way. At least we don't as elders, So a generation to me is like your lifespan, from the little ones to the elders that are within your lifetime, So it's just that the age group, it's their time and how they deal with it. And now it's just amazing for me to, because of the social media that's available and all the technology. I mean, good grief. I'm like, what did we have? We didn't have nothing. We didn't even have, there was telephone system, but if you didn't have long distance, you might as well not have it, So, and we didn't have any kind of a media, it was just word of mouth and gatherings. So it was really important that we moved around and gathered, But nowadays you don't have to do that. You can have studios like this, in the media, and it's so amazing. And I just think that each age group takes whatever's within their time, and utilize it. And there was a dry spell there, where things kind of slowed down, and I was looking around thinking, wait a minute, where is everybody? The issues are still here, things are still moving, but time will surface. Things will surface when it's their time, Yep. So you just regroup and you work with your grandchildren, and you work on the community level until those things start popping. So when your people are ready, things will move. We're just kind of waiting for you to grow up.
Hey everyone, Steffiera here, associate producer with Indian Collective. I really hope you're enjoying the Land Back for the People podcast. I know I am. But today I'm here to tell you about this amazing funding opportunity with Indian Foundation, and that would be the Community Self-Determination Grant. So, in case you didn't know, this is an unprecedented opportunity that invests in the long-term visions of Indigenous nations and our communities by fostering community-based solutions and Indigenous decision-making. Grant awards are provided to tribal nations, communities, and orgs that are most aligned with Indian Collective's vision and strategies of defend, develop, and decolonize, with a commitment to building Indigenous power. Indian Foundation will accept letters of interest beginning April 2023, and they must be submitted by May 2nd of this year. Community self-determination grant selections are expected to be made by August 2023, with grant terms beginning September 1st, 2023. So if you'd like to learn more information or you just want to visit our cool website, please visit grants.indiancollective.org. Thanks. I hope you enjoy the rest of the show.
So we're going to talk a little bit, we're here at Indian Collective headquarters. We're in Mini Luzaha, which to the listeners out there, Mini is water, Luzaha is swift or rapid. And I always like to remind people, I'm like, this is Mini Luzaha, AKA Rapid City, because this town was named after what our people called this town. It was named after the watershed, that comes through the Chesapa. And it, informs, but also the struggle for the Black Hills in the Chesapa is one of the longest existing legal battles in the history of the United States. It started with the Treaty of 1851 and 1868. And then there was the taking of the land in 1877. And then there was the Supreme Court decision in 1980 that said the Black Hills, in fact, was a violation of the U.S. Constitution and one of the most gross violations in history of the United States Constitution. But we're not going to return the land. We're going to pay just compensation for pennies on the dollar of something we never wanted to, And today we stand united against accepting resources from something that they stole from us. So for you, why are the Black Hills so important? Why are the Black Hills as sort of a cornerstone of the Indigenous people's struggle? Why is it so important to you personally, and why do you think it's important to the whole movement?
Well, just growing up with the thinking, that I've heard since the time I was young, is that the Black Hills, belong to us, belongs to our people. And there wasn't that much detail, I just grew up hearing that, and different times we'd hear people make kind of, in a joking way, like, Doksha Black Hills. In other words, when they pay us off, then I'll pay you back, that type of thing. So it was kind of
Doksha Black Hills.
Doksha Black Hills, So kind of grew up with that kind of, knowledge, in a kind of a, I don't know, wasn't really taken that serious because we didn't think there would ever be a time when that would happen, or that would even be something to actually talk about like we're doing now, is related to treaty rights and treaty violations. So, but also the fact that it's where our people originated. It's very, very sacred ground because this is where we come from, We're Star Nation, and then went underground for survival, and then that's where we came out from. So I think that is kind of because we're still land-based to a certain extent, the reservations, we still, as a people, we still have that connection. So I think it's just kind of, a lot of times it's kind of automatic that our people react. Because even though they don't know details or they don't talk about it that much, they grew up hearing about it. You know, and it's just blood memory, you know, ancestral memory really says a lot for us about why we are and what we do. We don't have to be convinced that we should resist and maintain. It's who we are.
That's absolutely true. So I always like, as an organizer, I always like to hear war stories. I grew up in Porcupine, sitting at the bottom of the stairs at my mom and dad's old place. There's the wood stove over here. There was the kitchen table here, and I used to. This is the same thing. It was before we had phones and all this. We had 2 channels, I think, on the res, and usually they were soap operas.
Yeah.
But I would sit on the edge of the stairs, you know, and I would listen to everybody as they would come through. And my favorite was like listening to war stories about times that we won.
Yeah.
Because I was always trying to grab onto something of like victory, you know, not just stories of fighting, but stories of winning. So I'd like you to share a little bit about the story of yourself, along with many others, in the Black Hills Alliance days, where people bound together here and actually successfully kicked the Union Carbide Corporation out of the Black Hills and stopped uranium mining in the Black Hills. You know, a lot of times we have a victory and then we check the box and keep going to work.
Yeah.
But I wanted to kind of create some space for you to reflect on that battle and what made it unique, and how you all were able to wage a successful battle against that corporation right here in the Black Hills.
Well, you know, the whole idea of the Black Hills Alliance, I mean, the name speaks for itself. It was an alliance, you know, of Native and non-Native people. And of course we had Bruce Allison, you know, attorney. I mean, that was amazing, you know, that we had that legal backing, you know. And so it grew, you know, it started out and it grew, and we learned as we went along. But the fact that we were an alliance, I think that's what really helped us, because everybody, I mean, we used to have meetings, you know, for hours and hours, but it was interesting. That's why we had them so long, because everybody had an opinion and we could bounce off of each other and learn from each other. It was really, really important, you know. So we had, with the alliance, we had, you know, different, what do you call it? Ways of attacking the issue. Okay. So, and, you know, going into court was one of them, you know, and we said, okay, how is the most effective way? And the thing about the alliance was not only individuals, but it was families, especially families from the different reservations, Pine Ridge Reservation, Cheyenne River, and Standing Rock. So, for example, my sister and my brother-in-law, they were, what do you call it? When they sign on to the lawsuit?
Plaintiffs?
Yeah, they were plaintiffs, yeah. For example, you know, among others. So that was the strength, I think, of any issues that we did, you know, we had just biggest, you know, gatherings and of people in the Black Hills was the Black Hills Alliance. I mean, we had, you know, 5 mile, you know, blocking the highway, just marching down the road, you know, hundreds and how, you know, people came from all over the country, because it was the era of the no nukes after they had the meltdown and what was that, Love Canal in the eastern part of the United States, you know, and they realized that all this.
3 Mile Island. Yeah.
3 Mile Island. Yeah. Yep. Love Canal. Anyway, 3 Mile, getting them mixed up. Anyway, so, yeah, so that was, it was a time, you know, the time was good at the, you know, and because we were in alliance, we had we had alliances with organizations all over the country, not only other tribes that were fighting, environmental issues, but also no nukes groups around the country. So it was an amazing time, and so yeah, we went into court, and what we found out, that was a real good tactic, because these corporations, when they come in and they exploratory, get permits like that, they have a timeline of when they're going to start making their millions, billions, So it's all about money. So once they're not making money, they're going to pull out. The investors want money. They don't care about issues or anything else. They just want money, So you slow them down. You do all these other, things get in their way, where they can't start mining and selling. Then you slow them down, and pretty soon, eventually, they leave, because they're all about money. When they're not making money, and it's sad, because they end up going somewhere else, to some other indigenous population in India or someplace else, But you just do what you can,
Mm-hmm.
And then it's always good, because we're indigenous, and Mother Earth is always first.
Well, you hit it right here. You hit the pocketbook of the corporations as one way to take them down.
Yeah.
I bring this up because, here it is. We're in years, 2023. Right now, of the entire Black Hills, there's 233,000 acres, or 1 in every 5 acres right now in the Black Hills is under mining claims.
Yes.
And whether they be gold, uranium, lithium, precious metals, and we're seeing all of it's really some of the same old actors that have always come to extract our resources here, but just in new names, new LLCs and new corporations, but the same old business and the same old lies.
Mm-hmm.
And this is helpful for people in my generation to hear that, to remind, like, they're big because they're only motivated by money. It becomes their biggest vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
It becomes it's the way to take down, it's the way to take down some of the biggest corporations in the world, is to affect their bottom line.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where, of course, organizing matters. Hitting the pocketbook matters. And, just last week, we've been fighting gold exploration and gold mining here in the Black Hills. And just last week, there's a proposal from the Bureau of Land Management to do a mineral withdrawal from the entire Rapid Creek watershed, which is wonderful, because it's basically kicking out the mining corporations potentially for the next 20 years. But there's still more work to be done. And I think that one of the lessons that you're sharing here is the importance of having alliances, the importance of maybe there's some people you don't agree with on every issue.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure back in the Black Hills Alliance days and the Cowboys and Indian Alliance days, you didn't agree on every issue. But how did you wade through, the fact that you might not agreed on every issue, but you agreed on this one? How did you navigate that? How did you weed through that at the time?
We just stayed focused. We stayed focused on the main issue, that why people gathered in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and everything else we just didn't participate in any discussions that were, that veered off, from we kept our eye on the issue and kept our focus, so that then that way people didn't feel like they had to constantly be, telling their side of the story or defending their position or anything, because we just removed all that and we just made it, and it worked, because a lot of times, well, how our people are, we're not always talking and everybody interrupting each other and stuff. Usually it's there's got to be an agenda, otherwise there's nobody talking. Nobody starts out. So that's one of the things with an alliance that the non-natives learned, is that if you disagree with somebody, you don't have to sit there and just, try to talk them down. You just don't say anything. And then it's so then we learned as we went along, but and after a while it was comfortable with people. People showed up, and it was just, because they knew they weren't going to be singled out or anything. It was just.
That's a good reminder. I mean, I think that we're living, our generation is living in like polarizing times where we're so stuck in we get stuck in our one issue, and everybody that we work with has to be in the same politics as all of us. But the reality is, to move mountains and to build movements, we have to meet places, and so it's a good reminder for us to hear that, especially in the times that we're in today. So all across the indigenous world and Indian country, and I've been able to travel all over the place. Now I see land back all over. Land back. When do we want it? Now. Land back. Because it speaks to the heart. It speaks to the heart of what we're fighting for. Our future and our past. And what would be like your message to the next generation that's coming up behind you, and to young people all over fighting for land back? What would be your main message to them?
I think it's really important that everybody remember that you're only responsible for yourself as far as change or how you think, and that know your issue. If you're interested, find out. Do your homework. And then however that works out for you, then that tells you what your commitment's going to be. So you don't have to go by anybody else's blueprint. And you know what else? You're indigenous. Your ancestors took care of everything for you already by their sacrifice and what they did. You don't need anybody's permission. Just know what you're talking about and get organized. And start out with yourself. Because once you have that, then knowledge is power. And pretty soon you'll look around, and you're surrounded by people that think like you and act like, on issues. So yeah, it's real simple. Keep it simple,
I appreciate that. Again, we're sitting here with Madonna Thunder Hawk, warrior woman and a matriarch that has been here for 50 to 60 years fighting for our land and guiding us. And you can actually, I want to do a shameless plug. There's a project called Warrior Women Project. And the purpose of this project was to remind the world that indigenous struggles were never possible without the matriarchs. The American Indian movement would have never happened if it wasn't the matriarchs. Many of these actions they've been a part of that shifted policy forever would have never been possible without women. And the Warrior Women Project brings to light those stories. And you can actually go to warriorwomen.org and learn more about the project and watch the film. So I just wanted to give you a chance to say anything about that project and that film before we close out for the day.
Well, there's a lot I have to say about it, but basically it's just, women's voices were not heard for so many decades, and now's the time, and we're able to do it ourselves. We have the resources and the know-how, and it's really important that we do it ourselves. We don't have to depend on anyone else to tell our story. Like when I was growing up, when I was young, we didn't have these resources. We had to depend on non-native everything. But now we have the resources and we're able to do it. So we need to do that. And not only that, but the archives are so important, because many of the interviews we have with Warrior Women's Project are interviews of archives of women of the matriarchs of the 60s and 70s, and especially for Wounded Knee and the negotiating team that negotiated with the White House. The majority of them were women. They were matriarchs. But you don't read that or hear about that anywhere unless we do it. And that's why at the 50-year anniversary, we did a banner project of these women. Their voices, they get, because the interviews were done while they were still here, and they're in the STAR camps now, but their descendants, their great-grandchildren can see their face and hear their voice.
So check it out, warriorwomen.org. It's a great documentary. It's a great project. It continues to travel throughout India, the country, and some of the schools. And you can find that at warriorwomen.org. We're going to wrap up here with the first episode of the Land Back for the People podcast. And as we close out, I always like to remember the people, like a reminder to the people that you're a part of a movement that is connected through the ancestors, that's connected through the land. And every single time that we participate in the fighting for land, we're making a commitment to those things. We're making a commitment to the ancestors. We're waking them up. And therefore, we're taking on our collective responsibility. And to the generation that is coming up, this newer generation, I think that sometimes we feel often like we are waiting for permission. But to sit here across from you in this, one of the matriarchs of our entire movement, to say, don't wait for permission. It is already your responsibility, is powerful to hear. And for everybody that's listening out there, I think it's important that you remember that you put that into action, that you take the moment to realize that you already have the ability to act now, that you don't have to wait. There is no some savior coming to save you, but that we have a collective responsibility. You heard it right here on the Land Back podcast, and you heard it from one of our matriarchs, Madonna Thunder Hawk. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you. I enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Ta-da! We're done. Yay. Woohoo!
First one in the bag.
In the bag.
Hey relatives, thanks so much for tuning in to the Land Back for the People podcast, episode 1. If you like this first episode, please give us a big thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for future episodes. If you want to put us in your pocket next time, take us with you, then you can find us wherever you tune into your podcast. And don't forget to follow Indian Collective on all of our social media platforms to stay in touch with us. Thanks so much for tuning in. We hope to see you in the next one. Bye, everyone.